And joining us now is Tim Ruth, who is here from the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries for our monthly segment. Welcome, Tim. Nice to meet you and visit with you today. Tell me, we always ask job titles first because it's a big organization, big department, and so tell us a little bit about what you do and what your role is with the department.
Yeah, sure. My name is Tim Ruth. I'm a fisheries biologist with the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. I've been working in St. Tammany and Washington parishes on the Pearl River for 15 years now. And I'm also a resident of St. Tammany Parish. That's
great to hear. I always like to hear that. Tell us what you're here to talk about today, a very specific topic.
Sure. Gulf Sturgeon, a very uncommon fish, indigenous to the Pearl and Bogachita rivers here in Louisiana.
What's for those who know nothing about fish, which is generally me, what's the difference in a sturgeon and a trout or a redfish or a bass or a catfish?
Sure, yeah. Globally, worldwide, sturgeon are known for their caviar. That's where some of the world's greatest caviar come from, the sturgeon fishes, and they're a prehistoric or an ancient species of fish. And their population numbers have been dwindling over the last century for various reasons. And here in Louisiana, in the Pearl and Bogachita River, we're fortunate to have a species of sturgeon known as the Gulf Sturgeon. And those sturgeon range from the west coast of Florida, Tampa Bay area, along the Gulf Coast to Louisiana. And in Louisiana, they really don't range any further west than the Pearl and Bogachita rivers or the Pontchartrain Basin. So also in St. Tammany, you're really blessed with the Pearl River. The Pearl River has the highest diversity of species, of aquatic species in Louisiana, of all the rivers. Over 120 species of fish and maybe 30 species of freshwater mussels. And some of those species have been diminishing. Numbers have been declining over the past few years, and Gulf Sturgeon included.
Why? I know that's a very simplistic follow-up question, but I always think of animals as diminishing in population. I don't think of fish. What takes the fish population down? And if you want to get into the sturgeon aspect of it, feel free to.
Yeah. Well, sturgeon have been, or particularly have a real small niche in that they're highly migratory. And adult Gulf sturgeons will migrate from the Pearl and Bogachita rivers into Mississippi Sound area, Cat Island and Ship Island, and overwinter there. And in the spring, the mature Gulf sturgeon will gather and migrate back into the Pearl River, Bogachita rivers to spawn. And unfortunately, there's been some modification and changes to the river over the last 100 years, including 2 small dams located in the Pearl, one on the Pearl River and one on the Bogachita River. And those small dams have been a barrier to the Gulf sturgeon migration and quite a number of other migratory species. So in years where their water may not exceed the level of those small dams, the fish aren't allowed to reach those spawning areas and other critical habitats located above those dams. So that's been one of the primary reasons here in Louisiana for the decline of the fish.
What makes that particular fish unique?
Oh man, well they're so ancient. They've been around since the dinosaurs were here. They're one of the living fossils. So quite a unique fish and quite a rare fish in Louisiana. Most folks I talk to, I try to talk to every fisherman that I encounter while I'm out on the Pearl or Bogachita rivers working, and many of them have never seen a sturgeon, even some old timers. But many have. Lots of folks have. They remember the days when they were allowed to take sturgeon. The taking or the possession of sturgeon was only prohibited in Louisiana in 1991.
So you're going to lead me into one of my stupid questions. You got to throw them back.
Sure, yeah. And folks, folks will encounter them typically in a hoop net, or sometimes occasionally they'll get snagged on a trout line or a bush line, and it's not a problem. It's incidental.
Yeah.
So it's just get the fish back, release it as quickly as you can.
I got you. So what do you monitor when you're monitoring this fish? What are you looking for? I'm sure you've already answered some of that through prior answers.
Well, one thing is that we need to learn more about its habitat. We need to learn more about why the fish may be declining. What are its life history needs? What type of water quality, what type of conditions are best for this fish to reproduce and survive and thrive and even expand its population? So what we do is we capture the fish and we outfit them with an acoustic tag, a tag that allows us to track their movements. So we have acoustic monitoring devices located throughout the Pearl and Bogachita rivers on into the Wrigley's, Lake Bourne, Lake Pontchartrain, in those areas that we know the sturgeon, and some areas that we expand out to see if the sturgeon are utilizing. And through that monitoring effort, we can gauge how often, when, where what habitats they're utilizing, and we go in and investigate those habitats, make observations about the habitat and characterize it, and that helps us to come up with some recovery projects. You know, what's lacking, what types of habitat could we improve, and
Have you
such.
found anything specific, you know, that helps, say recently, that helps grow it? I mean, and if not, you know.
Well, one of our main focuses is, you know, the overall restoration. You know, it's kind of like a landscape scale thing. You know, what goes on in the landscape in the river basin greatly affects the river and all the organisms that occupy it. So, you know, development, logging, highway development, things like that tend to put a lot of sediment and turbidity into the river that causes some declines and stuff like that. So, working with parish leaders and government officials on how to develop and make projects more eco-friendly and more friendly to the river basin. So it's been one of our primary goals.
I guess another way to ask my question is, what have the results been, you know, of some of your work?
Well, we've definitely found out, you know, more about where the sturgeon, when, where, and what they do, you know, through our telemetry efforts. As far as making progress, as far as restoration, you know, it's been a long, slow road. You know, the big project, the 2 small dams and stuff, were part of a federal navigation project, a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers federal navigation project. And that project really couldn't be modified or dealt with in any other way except things that were associated with navigation. So when it came to Gulf Sturgeon and other threatened endangered fishes and fish and mussel populations in the Pearl, we've always kind of had to try to you know, find ways to get around it and work with the Corps for improvements. And recently in 2016, through the WRDA bill, the Water Resources Development Act, the Pearl River Navigation Project was deauthorized. So that's going to open up the doors to a lot of restoration and a lot of improvements to the river and the canal system here in St. Tammany.
That's got to be exciting for you, isn't it?
It is, and I think it should be exciting for a lot of folks in St. Tammany and Washington parishes. You know, it's a lot of folks know of the Pearl River Navigation Canal. It's a you know, regularly used for recreational fishing and water skiing and water sports, as well as access to the Bogachita National Wildlife Refuge and the Pearl River Wildlife Management Area with like 80,000 acres of public properties that could potentially this project could provide more access to the residents of St. Tammany and Washington parishes to those areas and to the canal. Also, it'll open up the door to making some fisheries habitat improvements within the canal. You know, we may finally be able to get in and improve the boat ramps, improve parking, you know, things like that are now on the docket. You know, things like that are now, you know, actually within our scope. So.
In saying that, what can the common person, you know, in St. Tammany Parish do to help this cause?
You know, just be aware of the canal, you know, of the canal and the Pearl River Project, to educate themselves on, you know, the history of the project and where it's going, and also, you know, voice their concerns to the local governments, you know, if they feel a strong need that to maintain the canal and to improve the canal, you know, they need to let local leadership know that the canal and the river are important to them, and that we'll work with local parish officials to get these projects going.
You mentioned, I think you said you've been with the department with 15, 20 years, is that what you said?
17 years
17
now, yeah.
years.
I've been in St. Tammany for 15.
Has the project been around for that long? Or
longer than me, yeah.
A lot longer than you.
It precedes me, yeah.
Can you get into any of the history of the project, like how it came about?
Sure.
I know you're not a historian, but it'd be interesting to know a little of that.
Yeah. Well, the Pearl River Navigation Project was authorized in 1935, and it was completed in the late 1950s, and it was utilized. It was primarily for getting sand and gravel resources from Bogalusa to New Orleans, you know. And what it did was the lateral canal actually kind of creates a shortcut for navigation, and it creates a safe passage for navigation, the long, winding, shallow river navigation canal. And you know, some of the navigation and things really declined in the 1960s, and by the 1990s, it was just no longer in use. So, but the Corps it remained authorized by Congress for navigation. So they kind of just mothballed it, and Congress would fund it only enough for maintenance, you know, no more operation. Mm-hmm. So those little dams have just been in the river, you know, not utilized for navigation now for 30 years. So we're eager to see if we can, get those things out and restore passage for fish, as well as fishermen, as well as residents, hunters, and fishermen and trappers. So.
It's really interesting how you started here and you went here and now you're here, and it'd be interesting to see if this comes back full circle.
I hope so. I hope we get some. Hope we get some of this stuff completed.
Is there and now I'm asking you to predict the future. How long does it take to get to where you want to be? I mean, are we talking decades or 50 more years from now, or is this work that can be done in a year or two?
I really don't think so. I think a year or two beyond that for sure. We're for sure within the next decade. That we should see the river starting to return to a natural state. We should be able to get these sills out, and before long, perhaps. My grandkids will never know that those dams were there. The river will be like a natural,
right.
Quite a natural experience for them.
Really interesting. Anything else you want to add, or anything you might want to say if somebody wants to read up on this issue? Is there how would you recommend they go about doing that, or should they simply call you guys?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to ask is for folks who do encounter Gulf sturgeon while they're on the river, if they're in a hoop net, or if they see one jump, or if they observe them, is to give us a call. Any sighting locations or of the sturgeon help us. It may be somebody, let us know where the sturgeon are, and we can get out and take a look at that habitat and see what's going on there.
For the novice fisherman, do you know a sturgeon when you get one? I mean, what does it look like?
Oh yeah, it'll be prehistoric. It's going to have it's a cartilaginous fish. It really doesn't have a bony structure. It has a hard plated exterior instead of a bony interior. So you'll see bony scutes on these fish. They'll have a long snout with a mouth on the bottom, like a protractile mouth that they use. Yeah, you'll know. Yep. It'll be a fish you haven't encountered before, and most folks now can just browse the web, do a quick web search of it.
Worst case is you catch a fish you don't recognize, get on the phone.
Sure, yeah. Get on the web, get on the phone. Our office is in Lacombe, and we're in the book. And so you can give us a call, and we have folks there. If not myself, plenty of other folks are knowledgeable about the species as well.
Awesome. Anything else you want to add before we go?
I'm thinking
that's fine. Yeah. We covered a lot of ground.
Sure,
Tim Ruth, appreciate you coming and
sharing
this and very, very interesting stuff. And good luck. Good luck in your future.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity for us to share.